Hello, this is Benitomo Kamimura from aps Academy. The purpose of this video is to help you learn how to read out loud. Let's get started. ジェリーの密かな冒険 Going to the shore on the first morning of the vacation, Jerry stopped and looked at a wild and rocky bay, and then over to the crowded beach he knew so well from other years. His mother looked back at him. Are you tired of the usual beach, Jerry? Oh no, he said quickly, but then said, I'd like to look at those rocks down there. Of course, if you like. Jerry watched his mother go, then ran straight into the water and began swimming. He was a good swimmer. He swam out over the gleaming sand, and then he was in the real sea. He saw some older local boys, men to him, sitting on the rocks. One smiled and waved. It was enough to make him feel welcome. In a minute, he had swum over and was on the rocks beside them. Then, as he watched, the biggest of the boys dived into the water and did not come up. Jerry gave a cry of alarm, but after a long time, the boy came up on the other side of a big dark rock, letting out a shout of victory. Immediately, the rest of them dived and Jerry was alone. He counted the seconds they were underwater. 1, 2, 3, 50, 100. At 161, then another of the boys came up on the far side of the rock, and Jerry understood that they had swum through some gap or hole in it. He knew then that he wanted to be like them. He watched as they swam away and then swam to shore himself. Next day, he swam back to the rocks. There was nobody else there. He looked at the great rock the boys had swum through. He could see no gap in it. He dived down to its base again and again. It took a long time, but finally, while he was holding out on the base of the rock, he shot his feet out forward, and they met no obstacle. He had found the hole. In the days that followed, Jerry hurried to the rocks every morning and exercised his lungs as if everything, the whole of his life, depended on it. He counted how long he could hold his breath. Each day he improved his time. Even back at home, he timed himself by the clock and was proud to find he could hold his breath for 2 minutes. The authority of the clock brought close the adventure that was so important to him. The day after tomorrow, his mother reminded him casually one morning. They must go home. He swam straight out to the rock and looked down into the water. This was the moment when he would try. If he did not do it now, he never would. He filled his lungs, started to count, and dived to the bottom. He was soon inside the dark, narrow hole. The water pushed him up against the roof. The roof was sharp and hurt his back. He pulled himself along with his hands, fast, fast. His head knocked against something. A sharp pain dizzied him. He counted 100, 115. The hole had widened. He gave himself a kick forward and swam as fast as he could. He lost track of time and said 115 to himself again. Then he saw light. Victory filled him. His hands, reaching forward, meant nothing, and his feet propelled him out into the open sea. He floated to the surface, pulled himself up onto the rock, and lay face down, catching his breath. After a time, he felt better and sat up. Then he swam to shore and climbed slowly up the path to the house. His mother came to meet him, smiling. "Have a nice time?" she asked. "Oh yes, thank you," he said. "How did you cut your head?" "Oh, I just cut it." They sat down to lunch together. "Mom," he said, "I can hold my breath for 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Can you, darling? She said. Well, you shouldn't overdo it. You look a bit pale. I don't think you ought to swim anymore today. She was ready for a battle of wills, but he gave in at once. It was no longer of the least importance to go to the bay. How did you do? This is it for today. See you next time.